Today's conversation, Dr. Carrie Anne Hamilton, founder of Storytelling for Good, a social impact communications firm based in Washington, D.C. She is an award-winning strategist and storyteller. Please join me in welcoming Carrie Anne.
All right, and good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me? Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. I am so honored to be here, and as Sabia noted earlier, we couldn't be more inspired by the number of you that are in the room. We're 200 plus strong. We're both inspired. And our movement just grew by 200. This is not a movement, it's a movement, and you're part of it, and you were here, you heard it here first. I'd love to bring up my panelists to join me. And while they come up, I'm just curious if you could just share one word. You can shout it out. Just your reaction to the film. One word. Reaction to the film. Powerful. Powerful. Anything else? Devastating. Agreed. Raw. Sobering. Very, very sobering. And I think for me, resolve. That we don't have to accept the world that we have, and that we can really create the world that we want. And these two leaders that will join me on the stage are creating just that in Washington, D.C. I'm going to invite up first our executive producer, Tammy F. Bennett. Also the co-founder of IF, a foundation for radical possibility.
Co-CEO.
Co-CEO. Also joined by our other co-CEO, Han Lee, who is here. Welcome. And then joining us on stage, we'll have Tonia Wellins, who is the president and CEO of the Greater Washington Community Foundation. And first, I'm going to ask by a show of hands, how many people are not from Washington, D.C.? And by an amen, can you tell me how much of this film was resonant where you live? Amen. Amen. So this is both a local and a national issue. While we'll spotlight this afternoon Washington, D.C., really we want you to take this movement home. It's a call to action. It's a clarion call. It's not just a wonderful conversation in this beautiful setting. Where else would we rather be? But really we want you to take this charge, this movement to where your respective communities. So we're going to get started. Again, a round of applause for the creators. At Storytelling for Good, we truly see storytelling as a strategy. So again, thank you, Sabia, for bringing this to life, and thank you to the IF Foundation for your vision, for your storytelling, for your authenticity, and for really telling this very urgent story. Right. So we're going to get started. I want to just first ask Tammy, why this film? Why now?
Yes, thank you. Hey, everybody. So at IF, we are a private racial justice foundation. We're based in D.C., but we fund in suburban Maryland, D.C., and Northern Virginia, and we center Blackness. And at IF, we have this vision that Black people and people of the global majority live powerfully, abundantly, and beautifully in healthy, self-determined communities free of physical, social, economic, and ideological violence. And so at IF, the Black Wealth Gap is a part of our economic justice and reparations portfolio work. And we, as in philanthropy, we publish a lot of reports, we publish a lot of data, we commission a lot of work, and we throw a lot of money in that work. And after it's published, we post it on our website, we do a convening, and nobody reads it, right? And so nobody reads it, nobody's legislating from it, nobody's creating the policies that we need to see that actually impact the issues that these reports are about. But so I wanted to do something different about DC's Black Wealth Gap. We had been helpful in getting the racial equity legislation passed, which is called the REACH Act in 2016. And in that legislation, we stood up the Council Office on Racial Equity. And they had published a report in 2021 about DC's Black wealth gap. And again, nobody was reading it. And so I wanted to tell that story, but in a way that I thought people would watch and people would engage. And so I wanted to do a documentary. At that time, I was director of policy, but I was just now coming into leadership as co-CEO. So Han Lee, shout out to Han again, is my co-CEO. And I said I wanted to do a documentary on a Black wealth gap, and she supported it. And so that same month, this is November 2021, I believe, and I was invited to a documentary on Berry Farms, which is used to be a projects, and before that it was black land that was owned by Black people, and then it became the projects, and then the projects were being torn down, and so there was a documentary film on that story that I was invited to by Empower DC, which is a nonprofit in DC, and I go, and it was a great film, and I'm there, and Sabia I knew from the organizing work around racial equity that we had done back in 2016, and so I tapped her on the shoulder. I was sitting behind her at this screening, and I said, "Oh, how much would it cost for us to do one on DC's Black wealth gap?" And she was like, "Guerrilla style, $30,000, bells and whistles, $50K." So I put $50K in the budget for 2023 to do this film. And thank you. And we did it. We ended up going a little bit over, but $75,000 is very cheap for a documentary, and Sabia is absolutely phenomenal. So I actually can we give one more round of applause for Dr. Sabia Prince as the film's director and writer. But that's how we developed this project. At the same time, it was just serendipitous that when we were filming this, we were having the hearing at DC Council for the reparations bill, and that was June 2023 that you saw for the hearing. So that's how we came about. People weren't reading the reports, people weren't reading the data, and we thought this was a different way of storytelling and truth-telling that people would engage in.
Awesome, thank you. And then Tonia, you lead our community foundations. We could not be more proud of the work that you're leading. Community foundations galvanize change in communities. Can you introduce us to the work and the campaign for economic justice that you're leading at 75 million and counting? It's not too late to give to the work that Tonia and her colleagues are leading.
Thank you very much. So I want to start by just again acknowledging the amazing work of IF. They are fantastic partners. It is funny when you said to me, "Oh, how much would it cost?" Like, that's the question that Timmy and Han will always ask. Like, how much does it cost to do X, Y, or Z? And it's why we've been able to do some really powerful thing in the DC, in DC proper and the greater Washington region, because we're always looking for what else is it that we can do to push the envelope, to push the edge, to tell the story, and to impact change. And so I really want to highlight, and I've often referred to my colleagues at IF as pace setters. They're the ones who are stretching the furthest, and it pushes all of us to try to keep up. So as a community foundation, we are not necessarily considered radical, but we are on the progressive end, and I like to think that we're doing as much as we can to keep pace with our colleagues at IF. Our foundation is a 52-year-old community foundation. I say we're kind of middle-aged. Can you hear me? Middle-aged like me. Maybe I wasn't supposed to say the like me part. But we are $500 million in assets that are under our care and our management, and the largest funder in the greater Washington region. And so with that, I believe, comes a responsibility to build our power, both financial and social power, as best we can to support those who've been struggling the most for the longest time in our region. And as you heard me say, that is often Native Washingtonians. Black Native Washingtonians have been struggling the most for the longest time. And we have a duty and a responsibility to work for them. So our community foundation has long been a social justice community foundation. It was in 2021 where we decided to to hang our strategic framework on the North Star of increasing economic mobility and addressing the racial wealth gap. And I'm really proud that we've been able to do that because it means convincing high net worth individuals, most of whom do not look like you and I, that the cause for mobility, for economic mobility, for Black and brown people in a place like Washington, D.C., in our region, is one that is worthy of our time and our investment. And we've been able to do that successfully. Carrie Anne, to your point, we launched a $75 million capital campaign in 2022 that has us squarely focused on economic mobility strategies. And again, it's not racial wealth gap necessarily, but it's strategies that help us to at least improve conditions for people, for low-income people in lower-income communities, but to invest in strategies like guaranteed basic income, like children's savings accounts, like down payment assistance for moderately income families so that they can be able to pay for their homes, or have a down payment on a home, for strategies that include untangling heired property, for strategies that include wills and estates and trust for people who, again, may not normally be able to afford them. But we raised $75 million to be able to invest in strategies just like that, and I'm really proud of that work.
And congratulations on your leadership. The campaign started at 50 million. It's now at 75 and counting. And it really points to the power of leadership and creating and galvanizing a coalition of the willing and not so willing and bringing them into the tent. So thank you so much, Tonia. Obviously, there were so many hands that were raised. Again, non-Washington, D.C. hands. Please, one more time, folks who are not in Washington, D.C., thank you to our neighbors who are here as well. Tammy, I'd love for you to talk about how this film and this question of reparation and redressing wrong, economically and otherwise, is resonant beyond our immediate shores in Washington.
Yes. So, I mean, as we see in the audience, even people that are not from DC, the story resonates because it is the story, right? So DC is the scene here, but the script is American. And that's from Oakland to Detroit, from Chicago. And I'm from Chicago, so I am a transplant, but I'm from the south side of Chicago, and this story is the same. The south side versus north side, right? And versus in DC, it's, you know, Ward 1, 2, and 3 versus 7 and 8. And 5. And so, you know, what happened here happened all over the country. So federal programs that uplifted white families into the middle class, but excluded Black families. You had urban renewal that raised Black businesses and Black homes for the benefit of progress. You had also like the revitalization that we're seeing now, right, for the gentrification to displace the Black families that survived all those other things in this moment right now. And so it's not just a local story, it is a national story.
Yeah. While I was walking around, a friend in the back from Harlem, hello to my friend from Harlem, said this was so resonant in Harlem and many other communities across the United States. And as you aptly put, the scene is Washington. Did you hear that? But the script is American. And so that couldn't be more resonant. Philanthropy's role. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm just appreciating that the call for reparations has moved from fringes. You know, you all will remember that it was our Pan-African dashiki-wearing sisters and brothers who have been at the forefront of the reparations movement for generations. And it's moving more center stage. I was on my flight, I was talking to I don't know if Regina made it, a woman I met on the flight here today, and she said, it doesn't seem like reparations has gotten as much attention, and I begged to differ. I beg to differ. I think it has, again, moved from the corners of, you know, the sort of what people thought was the radical Black left to more center stage. And you know, I know we're not at the closing yet, but part of what I want to make sure that we offer is that even in this moment of what we are experiencing in this country, that we not lose sight of it. I mean, it is, we have to keep our eye on the horizon and not lose the faith. So I'm acknowledging the power of storytelling and telling our history in such a modern way that continues to give light and life to a centuries-old fight that we've been a part of.
Yeah. One unlikely partner in this movement is philanthropy, which, again, does not necessarily reflect the folks in this room, but changing radically based on the leadership on the stage and others in the room that represent that sector. And I'm curious, what role do you see philanthropy playing and continuing to play in accelerating, kind of foot on the gas moment, accelerating this call for both reparation and moving us from awareness to action in that respect? Curious your thoughts on philanthropy.
So again, I'll just very quickly say that the Community Foundation is not a reparations organization. That's if. However, we've been able to push the envelope as much as we can. I mean, I think everybody has their own sort of part in this race. And ours was around making the case for economic mobility and addressing the racial wealth gap. And through study, through engagement, through hard conversations with my board and with my fund holders. Like, we are a foundation of individual stakeholders who have a say in the direction that we get to take. But it was through those deep conversations, intense conversations, that we were able to land on a strategy that is adjacent to reparations. And I think adjacency is important, which allows us to be able to work together. So we're able to carry the work as far as we can push it, and then work with partners like Tammy and Han to push it to the next level. And it was a unique moment in our history. So we were just coming off, and you all will remember this. It seems so long ago now. We were coming off of the unfortunate murder of George Floyd, and so we had people's captive attention when it came to the fight for Black lives. And we were able to do things in those moments that, again, feel so distant right now, and we pushed through. I mean, I'm really proud that, and I had one donor to say, don't you all think you're going too far on this racial equity work? And my response to him was, and again, hindsight is so clear. When you have those moments, you have to push it, you have to lean in as hard as you can, because the pendulum will always swing back the other way. And that's what we did. This is August, and just in June of this year at my most recent board meeting, I always ask my board the question, are we rolling back? Are we doubling down? Are we staying the course? And they continue to affirm that we stay the course.
Thank you, Tonia. To our radical friend, it's in the name, friends, it's in the name. Foundation for Radical Possibility. I'm curious about your view on moving philanthropy from a role of gatekeeper to power sharer, and how you think about philanthropy's unquestionable role in this work.
Yes, so I think reparations or reparative philanthropy is really twofold. One, it's for our sector to be advocating for reparations to Black people, right? So there's a way that we can do advocacy. Some of us are very limited in what we can do, like we can't lobby, right? But we can educate around history, around what reparative policies can and cannot do. And then also, there's also a debt that our sector owes, because we're talking about paying debts. And so philanthropy, like the debt that we have, the wealth that we have, a lot of it was extracted from Black genius, Black labor, and Black land. And so there's also a debt that we have to reckon with our own endowments. How much of that wealth was gotten from Black extraction, and what are we doing to engage and repair to those communities?
A couple more questions, and then we'll go to our audience about narrative and advocacy. Tammy, just curious about what you think sets this film apart? Obviously, there have been lots of conversations on this topic. What were you endeavoring to do that, again, fuels this conversation forward and towards action?
I wanted to affirm Black people. I wanted to affirm our story. I wanted to affirm our memory. I wanted to affirm our anger, our pain, right? And also to validate it because it's real and it's also powerful. I also wanted to make philanthropy uncomfortable. I wanted policymakers to become courageous, and I wanted to see action. This is an advocacy tool. We want action. There is impact to be had when people engage with this film. I wanted you to feel something, right? And I wanted those feelings to move you to action.
Yeah. And Tonia, you touched on this, different stakeholders, board members, fund holders, having conversations and shifting perspectives on what feels like a radical idea. I'm curious, what tool has been effective for folks who have been maybe reticent and moving them towards, I can see myself in this work?
So I'd say storytelling, of course, but also the sharing of personal narratives and personal stories. I've actually just been able to, last week I released an essay on my own family history, my own family story, dating back to 1805 in Ivor, Virginia, in Southampton County. And most of the time when our peers and sometimes our donors, they don't always connect like us to a history of enslavement. You know, for some reason there's this
Feels divorced.
Yeah. There's an understanding of like disconnection. Like maybe it wasn't her family story, but it was somebody else's family story. And so I do take a lot of pride, quite frankly, in telling my own family story, my own family history, of sharing that my own parents were blue-collar workers. They worked in a factory swing shift. One parent worked one shift and the other parent worked the other shift so that somebody could be home with the kids all the time. And making the connection real that the pathway for Black mobility has been a long and drawn out path that some of us have been able to break through, but the masses have not been able to. So it's personal narrative, hearing their personal narrative, but then also leaning in on possibility. No one really wants to invest in what they think are going to be losing propositions. They want to invest in strategies that they believe will win. And so, again, while we've not been able to make the full leap, I have a number of board members and stakeholders who do believe in and will support reparations. But in talking about the economic mobility journey, they know that these things are good for, they've worked for their children and for their families, and these are the same strategies that will work for ours.
There's tremendous power in first-person storytelling, and we've come a long way from divorcing ourselves from the work, being very distant, being very objective, to really centering that we are a part of both the history and also the solution. We can shape the future that we want. Last question is about policy, and I'm curious to you, Tammy. There are audience members that represent philanthropy and government and media and public sectors, and I'm curious about what concrete roles do you think that our audience members can play in their respective communities and professional lives?
Yeah, I think like we would be remiss in not acknowledging that, like in the beginning of the film, Tonia, you're talking about the economic power that big government has had as pathways to economic prosperity for Black people in DC. And we're in a moment of upheaval of that, right? Like 300,000 Black women have left the workforce, majority from federal governments, since DOGE started that work, right? And so there is something happening right now, right? The regular status quo that did not benefit us is being dismantled. And so I think it's an opportunity for us. So it's not one economic policy, but I am going to pass the mic to somebody that can give us some pointers in a second. But I do want to acknowledge, like we should really start having conversations around capitalism. And I know some Black folks are like, true, I have friends that are, I'm a capitalist all day, every day, right? But we know that capitalism has not worked for us. We also know that American capitalism is the lowest road of capitalism. It is maximum extraction, right? Not caring for people at all. And so, I think that we have to have a conversation around, if the status quo is being turned over right now, what is the opportunity? What is the vision for us? And what would it look like for material conditions not to be commodified, right? And by material conditions, I'm talking about the things that you have to have as a human, right? And that's education, that's food, that's housing, that's healthcare, that's sanitation, that's safety, that's time. Come on, y'all, 4-day work week, 28 hours. People want to spend time with their families. And then water, right? So those are 8 rights right there. What it would look like if Americans renegotiated the social contract with our government. And we said these rights are like for everybody, for any and everybody. Not only would it impact the Black wealth gap, it would impact everybody's wealth gap, right? Like, it's not just for Black folks' benefit. Often, no, Black people are the canary in the coal mine. What happens to us, what's happening to us, is often what happens to everybody else. And so that's like big picture, like we're in a moment of opportunity. The other thing though, like we wanted to gift you guys a copy of Dr. Andre Perry's the Black Power Scorecard, and they did not get here in time, y'all, I'm sorry. But if you do this QR code and put your information, Mahogany Books will mail you your own copy. So make sure you get your copy. And so Andre talks about communities all over the country where Black people are actually doing well. Like they're living longer, they're living in wellness. And what are the factors that are impacting these Black folks' longevity? And what would it look like to have a local scorecard that drove investments in our community? And so please read that book. And then I also want to acknowledge Professor Dorothy A. Brown right here. She came out to support. Professor Brown wrote, she's a professor at Georgetown Law. She's amazing. She wrote The Whiteness of Wealth. And so when you talk about the tax code and how the tax code has extracted wealth from Black people, even though allegedly it's race neutral, it is not. And so, Dorothy, come tell us some policies real quick, please.
Thank you for that. So the first thing is tax data by race needs to be public. So y'all don't know that every April 15th, Black people lose, white people win. You don't know because folks in Congress say, well, it's colorblind. But what my research has led to is research that shows if you're Black and file for the earned income tax credit, you are 3 to 5 times more likely to be audited than if you're not Black. So how is it that a colorblind system somehow targets Black earned income tax credit filers like a heat-seeking missile? Okay? So first thing is we've got to get the information. And when we think about how to fix it, you mentioned one of the policies, guaranteed income. Yeah. Everybody, we saw during COVID what people did with those payments. They fed, they clothed, they slept. Yeah. Okay, they didn't have to worry about where the next meal was coming from. So, I've got a book coming out in January 20th, called Getting to Reparations. And I'm making a case, and I talk about the DC Emancipation Act, and I'm just gonna, snip it. Federal government has paid reparations 4 different times, just not to Black people. Read the book.
Congratulations. We can't wait. January 20th, bookmarking now.
Carrie Anne.
Final thoughts.
Yeah, I just wanted to encourage Timmy to tell the story about how we had to change the name of the reparations bill.
Yes.
Why don't you tell that story, Tammy?
I'll say, so our strategy for the DC reparations bill was woke. It's what we could say woke and cloaked, okay? And by woke and cloaked, what we mean is we're still doing the work. people are erasing their websites, people are, changing all the titles, that doesn't mean that you have to stop the work even though they changed the title, right? And so for DC, because we don't have statehood, what we knew is as we started getting close to the second, so in DC, you have to have 2 votes from DC Council for you to, for the bill to pass into legislation, but before it passes into legislation, it goes to Congress. And so there is this 30-day window where Congress can overturn our legislation because we don't have statehood. And so when you saw the hearing, that was June 2023, and we finally were getting the votes in this past November. And so we got first vote, second vote, but before we even went for a full council vote, we changed, because we didn't know what the outcome of the election would be, we changed the title of the bill. So in the documentary, you see DC Reparations Task Force Act, but it's actually, we changed the title of the bill to something really innocuous, the Insurance Database Amendment Act, right? And so, yes, so this is that woke and cloak work, right? So we changed the title of the bill. So then in DC Council for the vote, we passed the vote through consent agenda. We didn't even, because we had it funded 1.5 million, right? So it wasn't a fiscal impact statement. No council members, we told them all, be quiet, just vote, consent agenda, right? So nobody even knew, Washington Post, everybody comes to our hearings. They didn't even realize that the reparations bill was being passed, right? And so we got it through consent. First vote in November, second vote in December. And then it went to Congress and it sat there and everybody was quiet. Washington Post asking us for quotes. Oh my God, we didn't get it passed. Be quiet. Please shut up. Don't say anything, right? And so nothing. And so then March 7th, DC legislation became law. And then after that, then the Republicans found out, and it was all the articles were the sneaky way DC got their reparations bill passed. We got it passed, but then they did strip our funding, right? And so there are ways to operate right now where you're doing the work and you're silent about it. You're working with your partners, but you don't have to publish everything because that's just going to make yourself a target. So we do try to move the work that's very important. You want to move in silence. And so we did that with the DC reparations legislation. It is the law. And so now we're fighting to get that funding back, but they can't do nothing about that bill passing.
Yeah. This PR person, that's my favorite story, right? Because oftentimes you think you have to take out a full-page ad to drive something forward, and sometimes it is about engaging folks, like where to show up at dawn, right? And we don't advertise that, right? We pass the wire. For our deltas in the room, you know what that means. Okay, pass the wire, pass the wire. I want to pause here and ask our audience members who have questions, reactions. Can we do a mic run all the way in the back? The gentleman with a hat on over there. We're making our way to you. And then others, yes, we see hands. We will make our way. But thank you all so much. You've been a captive audience. And again, we're excited that our movement has grown by 200 plus.
Hi, my name is Anthony Green. I am 142nd Street and Lenox Avenue in Harlem, New York. What happened in what happened 2nd Street, Lenox Avenue in Harlem, New York. My family ran a company called Save Harlem Housing for 20 years. And to own in their communities. So that's the issue we've got to do in informing and collaborating with people who own property, who can't afford to mortgage it and build on it, with people like people here who can afford to do that. That's the way you can change what's happening in DC, based on what I learned from Harlem.
I absolutely agree. I think we need to be organizing with ourselves right now. I think we need to be funding ourselves right now. And I also think we need to be developing a shared analysis with ourselves right now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Our individual successes don't translate to disrupting generations of institutional harm. And so it really will take collective power and collective strategy to really make a difference across our communities. There was a hand raised in the center.
And as we're getting to the next question, just be more transparent about finances.
Yes.
I mean, we can't affect our own personal or family situations if we're not being honest. There's an article in the works for me about not selling Big Mama's house, and thinking through how do we be creative about ways to keep grandma and great-grandma's house in the family, and not letting the opportunity to sell it and make a lot of money one time be the first thing that we grab at. But that really requires more trust within and across families, more communications, alongside all of the other things that we're doing, right? So that's how we're pushing on the outside. But as Tammy noted, there's an internal, brother in the back, there's an inside conversation that we also have to have about how we're going to build, strengthen, and maintain our communities and our assets.
Point of privilege, just want to thank the Floyds for supporting this film. Stephanie and Floyd Rance, the Rances, for supporting this film. We really appreciate you. Thanks for your leadership.
What are your plans for your next documentary, your next big story? Are you going to stay in D.C., or what are your plans? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. I do have a film. Let me stand out of people's way. I do have I just got funding to do my third film. It would be another Washington, D.C. story about a historic black community that traces its history to 1873. And it's an environmental justice theme, because this is an area that was zoned, it's a black neighborhood historically that was zoned for industrial development in the 1930s, purely racist. So I'm going to be telling that story, and I'm a scholar, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a visual artist, and I'm a filmmaker. So I just signed a contract through my qualitative research firm with the Small Business Anti-Displacement Network at the University of Maryland to do some programming for them. I developed a treatment on Prince George's County, and I'm going to be talking with some folks in Montgomery County about doing a film with them. So there's an endless array of things that need to be done.
Thanks, Sabia.
Hi, I'm from.
I'm
Hilda from Tulsa, and I live in Pasadena now. But anyway, it just was so affirming and yet so painful to hear. My mother, two of my mother's brothers lost homes in Tulsa in the 1921 massacre, and then my father in the 70s had a hotel. A lot of properties in our home had an apartment building, and urban renewal came through, or eminent domain, pushed everybody off like we saw in the film. And my dad was a rebel, and he was like, no, you're not. So they wound up demolishing it and then making him pay for it. Yeah. So my brother, I'm the youngest of 8 children, and also my grandfather was enslaved, my mother's father. So it's not that 400 years ago. It's my grandfather who was sold at 4 years old. Fast forward, my oldest brother is 87. He's still writing letters trying to get that money back about our property in Tulsa. And so I wondered if there's some guidance about what I might tell him. He's written the mayor, he's still going, he's 87. And so who could he write?
There's a few folks that we can connect you with that are doing work in Tulsa. Demario is a lawyer that's been fighting for the surviving Tulsa the survivors. I think there are only 3 left now, y'all. It might even be 2. I think somebody just passed. But then also Dreesen Heath, who was actually testifying for the DC bill, and then also is doing the work around the federal legislation. So I don't know if people are tracking. Despite this administration, folks are still pushing for reparations even at the federal level. So in January, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley reintroduced H.R. 40, and then in May, Congresswoman Summer Lee just reintroduced Reparations Now, and they're both working with folks in Tulsa. So I'll connect you with both.
Final question here.
Thank you. Just real quickly, I have 2 points I'd like to share. First of all, this was great. I really appreciate the history lesson and where we are today relative to when the film ended. But I would like to stretch it out a little bit and say America has destroyed a lot of places, but they had an approach to rebuilding. So showing America a model on how to rebuild might be helpful. So for example, America dropped a bomb on Nagasaki. They dropped another bomb in Japan. And America used all its resources to rebuild those places. And now Japan is one of the most beautiful places in the world. France got destroyed by Germany. America rebuilt France, and we all want to go to Paris. So there's a model out there on how to get it done in addition to the reparations piece. And I would encourage folks who do the documentaries, who do that type of thing, to look elsewhere in what America did and say, a metaphor, you can do that here in the black community. You can do the exact same thing in the exact same way. Just one small point. The second point is, I've been in the private sector. I'm in wealth management, and I lived in DC up until 2 years ago. And I believe that in addition to the public sector, which we talked a lot about today, you have to hit the private sector. Companies are grossing $100 billion a year, and they go into the black community and put a branch and say, look what we did, for a PR campaign. But we have to put pressure on them. And if we put pressure on them, if we force their stock price to change by 50 cents, they would see themselves losing $100 million. So maybe they'd rather give an effort, an initiative, 50 million, 100 million, instead of losing it in the stock market. So start thinking about changing the paradigm a little bit and not just rely on the public sector, but go to the private sector really, really hard, because they're sitting there and they're sitting there and let the public sector take care of it. We don't want them coming at us. But I think the ability and the dollars are there to support what you guys are talking about. Okay?
They were there. But there is not an institution or a sector in this country that is not culpable, from the universities to the private sector to the public sector, state, local, and federal government. So I agree with you. You're absolutely right. The only thing I would offer in retort to the rebuilding of other places is that they're not black. We can never underestimate the persistentiousness of racism, of anti-black racism. And so I think the examples are fair, and our work is still cut out for us when it comes to fighting anti-black racism. But the points are well taken.
The point I'm making is, just like she said she changed the name of the bill to get it passed, sometimes you got to play the game. You got to get them to open it. Sure. That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
It's an opportunity.
It's working with Target, right? Absolutely. So yeah, it's absolutely a strategy.
Yeah. Well,
everything's on the table.
Everything's on the table. Nothing's off the table. Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, Tonia. Thanks to all of you for being here this afternoon.
Thank you, Carrie Anne.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Carrie Anne.
And we implore you to take it home and really don't let this movement stop here. We can create the world we want. Thank you all so much. Have a great afternoon.